Hi, my name is George Dagnino. I'm the editor of the Peter Dag portfolio. I would like to talk to you about today about an amazing relationship between yields and stock prices. This is not the relationship, if yields rise, stock prices go down. If yields go down, stock prices were up. No, it's much deeper than that. And I think it's fascinating. Not only that, but it's going to help us make some money. So let's go for it. I need to remind you the basics of the business cycle and how asset classes move. Uh, phase one is the phase, this one is the phase where there is growth, inflation is down, interest rates are down, business is manufacturing is sector, they're building gadgets, service, the economy is growing, income, population. Phase two is when inflation starts rising because the economy is overheating, and what you see is a slowdown in phase three because consumers, of course, make less money because of the erosion coming from the inflation. They stop slowly down. Manufacturing find itself with too much inventory. They cut production until when? Until, of course, here in phase three, that's when earnings start coming down. Phase four is when there is the economy regroups, interest rates decline. Uh, it's a very slow growth, so interest rates decline. Inflation is declining, commodities are declining, the stock market is declining because of declining earnings. So this is when the economy regroups and corrects all the problems that have been created in phase two. And then you have, when they come down, then people have more money because inflation interest rates are coming down. They start buying, and the cycle starts all over again. This curve is also very closely related to the growth of the money supply, and is a measure of liquidity in the system. When people borrow money, business borrows money, banks lend it, and this is how liquidity increases. When business makes less money, smaller profits, they put less money in the banks. The banks do not lend as much. In there, you see liquidity is coming down, stock market and the economy slow down, and the stock market weakens. So this is the basic relationships. So let's see now what is happening now. What I'm going to show you with this presentation is how interest rates are related to what's happening in the economy and in the stock market, not if they rise or decline, but how much the levels that they have relative to 12 months ago. Okay, relative to 12 months ago. So, and this is the graph. This is the graph of 2-year yields relative to 2 months ago. So you take the current yields and you subtract the yields of 12 months ago. If the curve rises, like here, it means that yields are rising relative to 12 months ago. If instead the curve declines, like here, yields are coming down relative to 12 months ago. And what I'm going to show you is how the whole system is greatly influenced, not really by the change in interest rates, but the level of interest rates relative to 12 months ago. So I'm going to show you that this trend is a positive trend. This is a negative trend, and is related to, I'll show you what it's related to. It's very interesting. Money supply and stock prices. Let's go with the next slide now. Okay, this is the same graph as before. The only thing I've done is inverted it. So this is when the curve rises, means that interest rates are declining relative to 2 months ago. And the reason I inverted is to give an idea that when this happens, when interest rates decline relative to 12 months ago, is a positive thing. It's a positive thing. Why? Because as interest rates decline, business at the beginning, when there is a peak and start declining relative to 12 months ago, they say, gee, money is getting cheaper, so I'm going to start borrowing money to finance the project that I delayed. And as interest rates declining relative to 12 months ago, business increases its lending activity. And this, of course, is related to the fact that this curve is rising like here, meaning that interest rates are declining relative to 12 months ago. Obviously, when interest rates instead of rising relative to 12 months ago, like here or here, this is bad news because as business sees the cost of money increasing relative to 12 months ago, start borrowing less, and therefore you would expect the economy to slow down. But let me show you really what happens in the next slide. And this is the relationship that really blew my mind when I saw it. But it makes a lot of sense. But again, you got to think it through. It's not as immediate. It's the chart that I showed you before. When they interest rates decline relative to 12 months ago, the blue line means it's increasing, which represent the change in interest rates relative to 12 months ago. When instead interest rates are rising relative to 12 months ago, the blue curve declines. What is amazing is that this curve, the blue line, this change in interest rates relative to 12 months ago is closely related to the growth of the money supply. In other words, what I'm saying is, and this is important, is that the growth in liquidity is determined by how interest rates change relative to 12 months ago. Why? As I said before, because business, as they see interest rates slowly declining, they gradually borrow more and more because they feel more confident that the trend is down. But what are this borrowing money done by the banks? Is M2. Because when they borrow, then they deposit the money in the banks, then the banks take that money and relend it again, and so there is a multiplier, and this becomes M2. So when interest rates are declining relative to 12 months ago, you see the money supply slowing down. And there is an increase in liquidity because, again, this printing money by the banks. They are the only one printing money, and the banks print money. However, when interest rates rising relative to 12 months ago, like in this period here, then liquidity, the money supply declines because there is not the amount of money being lent decreases because of this increase in interest rates, and that's why liquidity declines. Now, what the good news is that we are in a period where interest rates have been declining relative to 12 months ago, and in fact, you see the money supply growing faster. And this is why everybody has been wrong on recession. And as you know, in my videos, you can go back months, I've been saying I don't see why there should be a recession if the money supply is growing, and it's growing, as I write in my publication, at around close to 4%, which is a growth of around 2% in the economy with 1.5 inflation. So it's a very disinflationary environment what we are having. But let me show you another interest. So this increase in liquidity, therefore, you would not be surprised if I tell you that the change in interest rates, this blue line, is closely related to the way the stock market grows. Let me show you. So how all this is related, for instance, to the stock prices. We know that the decline in interest rates relative to 12 months ago is related to the money supply. The money supply is what driving the economy and inflation. But what about this changing liquidity in the money supply? How does that relate to stock prices? So the red line here is the change in interest rates over 12 months. So that if, as I mentioned before, if the curve rises, means that interest rates are declining relative to 12 months ago. So there is an increase in liquidity, and look at what happens, the growth in stock prices. But when liquidity starts declining because interest rates now are rising relative to 12 months ago, the change in stock prices dives. But when interest rates start declining relative to 12 months ago and the red curve start rising, look at what happens to the stock market. Is rising. So what am I saying? As long as interest rates are lower than 12 months ago, declining or lower than 12 months ago, then there is an increase in liquidity because of this borrowing by business, and therefore there's injection of liquidity by the banks. They're printing money basically to lend money. Then this increase in liquidity is also favorable to stock prices. And this is what we are having right now since the fall of 2022. We have a decrease in interest rates relative to 12 months ago, and we have the stock market accelerating, and the change has been positive. So as long as this situation lasts, the market should be okay, and the economy should be okay. The problem is if the 2-year yields start rising relative to 12 months ago, then we might have trouble ahead. This is the book I wrote years ago, was commissioned by McGraw-Hill and has been translated in many languages. It's still sold in Asia and, of course, in the United States. And this is where really everything that I know is in that book. You can read they had some excellent reviews. So you can pause the video and read it. This is a reminder that we have 3 levels of membership: videos only, or otherwise videos and market updates. And we have membership number 3, which is the Peter Duck portfolio, which is published twice a month, videos, model portfolios, market updates, and of course you will receive emails every time we make a stock transaction, which are doing, quite frankly, pretty well in this environment. I want to thank you very much for following this video. I hope you find it interesting. I think this is a great relationship with it, because I think it is. Anyway, I always get excited when I find something that I didn't expect to find. Anyway, if you want to dive more into what our work at Peter Dack's Business Cycle Academy, please do visit www.patreon.com/Peter Dack. Again, thank you for coming, for seeing this video, and I hope to see you really soon. So long, and have a great day.